As the sun dipped below the horizon, a soft indigo hue blanketed the quiet suburbs of Brisbane. Inside a modest two-story home, a faint buzz of excitement stirred the still evening air. A teenager knelt by the television set in the downstairs den, his hands carefully working with the tangled cords of a newly bought AV transmitter. But here, in the dim, isolated space below, only the hum of ambition filled the room. He had long coveted the idea of having cable TV right in his own room, refusing to let the limitations of a single cable box restrict him. This transmitter was his ticket, a technological bridge between floors. He connected the final wire with a satisfying click and powered on the television, expecting the familiar glow of the channels to bathe the room. Instead, the screen stayed dark. A deep sigh escaped his lips. He flipped switches, adjusted cables, and even gave the transmitter a frustrated tap. Still nothing. It wasn't until he noticed the upstairs cable box, the heart of the system, was left unplugged. Of course, he muttered, a half-laugh escaping him. He raced up the stairs, plugged in the box, and returned downstairs, hopeful. The screen sputtered to life, but what appeared on it was not the familiar network logo. At first it was a storm of static, the kind that fuzzed and danced like white snow across the screen. Then, shapes began to form within the noise. The outline of a bedroom slowly took shape, ghostly and vague at first, but sharpening with every passing second. Confused, he leaned in closer. His own reflection wavered in the screen's light, merging with the image of the unfamiliar room. For a moment, a bizarre thought crossed his mind. Was that his bedroom? His stomach turned uneasily. Without thinking, he snapped a photo with his phone. Panic setting in, he bolted upstairs to find his sister. She was in the kitchen, her back turned, idly scrolling through her phone. Breathless, he stammered out an explanation, dragging her downstairs. Together they stared at the screen. The bedroom was still there, pristine and unsettling in its clarity. The bed, the dresser, the faint light filtering through drawn curtains. None of it matched anything in their house. The realization hit them like a wave of ice. This wasn't their home. They shut off the TV, too unnerved to continue watching, but curiosity, that persistent gnawing itch, refused to let them rest. Hours later, when their parents returned, they recounted the strange occurrence in hurried, overlapping sentences. Their father, skeptical but intrigued, led the family back down to the den. The screen, when turned on again, still displayed the alien bedroom. Only now something was different. A man stood within the frame. He was older, graying at the temples, dressed in plain clothes. He seemed unaware of the hidden lens capturing him, going about mundane tasks, folding laundry, picking up items from the floor. The father's face blanched. "That's Tom," he whispered, the neighbor 2 doors down. The room fell into stunned silence, broken only by the soft whir of the AV receiver. The knowledge sent a sickly shiver crawling up his spine. They weren't just intercepting random static. They had a window, an uninvited, illegal window, into their neighbor's private life. For days, the family argued about what to do. Turning off the AV receiver seemed like the simplest solution, but morbid curiosity kept pulling them back to that screen. Each day, the feed continued, eerily uninterrupted. Sometimes the man wasn't alone. Workers wearing tool belts and dust-covered boots wandered in and out of the room. "Renovations," the father said. Tom had mentioned them weeks ago. On a humid Thursday afternoon, they turned the TV on again, almost ritualistically, and were greeted by a strange sight. One of the workers stood directly in front of the hidden camera, staring at it. His face loomed close to the lens, distorted slightly by the cheap optics. He smirked, then lifted his hand and adjusted the camera's angle. The family froze. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone knew the camera was there. Someone had placed it intentionally. The father couldn't stand it any longer. That evening, he marched over to Tom's house and told him everything. Tom's confusion was genuine. He had no idea what his neighbor was talking about. Suspicion turned quickly to urgency. Together they tore through the bedroom. It wasn't easy, but behind a loose section of drywall, hidden like a cancer, they found it. A tiny black camera, wired into the wall itself. Police were called immediately. Investigators took over the property, watching, waiting. Every night for a week, an unmarked car sat quietly on the opposite side of the street. On the sixth night, just before dawn, a beat-up sedan rolled into view. It parked casually near Tom's house. Inside sat a man, hunched over a laptop, his face illuminated by the bluish glow of the screen. He never left the vehicle, never approached the house. He simply sat, monitoring. Before the first hints of sunrise kissed the horizon, he drove off into the darkness. It took 2 more nights before the police moved in. The man was arrested on the spot. In his possession were several SD cards filled with illicit footage. It was the plumber, one of the renovation workers. He had planted the hidden camera during a routine job, fully intending to invade the lives of those around him. The teenager who had first set up the AV transmitter could never quite shake the feeling that he had stumbled upon something he was never meant to see. And even years later, every time he caught the faint crackle of static from a television screen, a cold fear prickled the back of his neck. The night air in Lansing, Michigan was unnaturally still. Crickets chirped somewhere deep within the suburban darkness, but around the boy and his mother, there was an unsettling hush. It was just past 11 p.m., and the two of them walked their dog along the cracked sidewalks of their neighborhood, the leash slack between them. The boy tugged his jacket tighter, feeling a sudden chill creep under his skin. That's when he heard it. A soft, irregular whistle. It drifted out from the direction of the swamp that bordered their neighborhood, a series of low, hollow notes that almost sounded like a bird call, but wrong. Off tune, too deliberate. His mother stiffened beside him. "Let's head back," she said, voice low and urgent. They quickened their pace, the whistle fading behind them, swallowed by the dense night air. 2 years passed. The boy was older now, more independent. One late night, he decided to walk the dog alone, tracing the familiar sidewalks under the thin glow of the streetlights. The world felt quieter, heavier somehow. Then there it was again. That same broken, human-like whistle, slicing through the night. Memories slammed into him. His mother's urgency, the chill that had wormed its way into his bones. Instinct overrode curiosity. He turned and sprinted home, the dog barking in confusion. He didn't mention it to anyone. Some things were better left buried. Years melted away. He moved halfway across the country, trading the damp woods of Michigan for the open, rolling landscapes of South Dakota. He built a new life, a new routine, and the whistle became just another shadow in the dusty corners of his memory. Until one 4th of July evening. He and his girlfriend settled on the grassy bank of the Missouri River, a cooler between them, waiting for fireworks to shimmer across the water. Most of the crowd had wandered upstream for a better view, leaving them wrapped in a cozy private bubble. The sky was a deep indigo, the first stars blinking awake. And then, like a cruel echo from the past, the whistle. His body froze before his mind could catch up. It was the same irregular, almost human melody, drifting across the rippling river. He pulled out his phone, hands trembling slightly, and hit record. "You whistling?" he whispered to his girlfriend, forcing a casual tone he didn't feel. "Yeah," she chuckled. "You?" The camera's microphone captured their hushed exchange, but the whistle continued, layered, distant, and undeniably separate from either of them. A soft paddling noise joined the night sounds. Turning the phone's camera toward the river, he caught a fleeting glimpse. A lone canoe, barely a silhouette, cutting through the inky water. In it, a figure paddled slowly, almost lazily, their movements unhurried, as if savoring the moment. The figure drew closer, details refusing to resolve in the darkness. The boy, now a man, called out, his voice cracking with tension. "Who are you?" The canoeist didn't answer. Instead, the figure paused, lingering in the shallows, before silently turning the canoe around and gliding back into the dark embrace of the river. They packed up in a panic, barely speaking as they fled back to the car. For nights afterward, he replayed the recording, headphones pressed tight, searching for clues. But all that greeted him was that haunting whistle, woven into the fabric of his nightmares. Was it the same person from Michigan? Was it coincidence? Or had someone followed him across years and hundreds of miles? He never found an answer. But sometimes when the world goes quiet and the river mist creeps low over the ground, he swears he can hear it again. A broken melody, beckoning from the shadows. The glow of Amanda's laptop bathed her small apartment in a pale, artificial light. The hour had long since slipped past midnight, but she was determined to find a new place to live. Scrolling through endless listings, a title caught her eye. Roommate wanted, female only. The rent was suspiciously low, just $225, 0 cents a month. But in her expensive city, bargains like that were rare treasures. Curious, Amanda clicked. The ad was brief, almost clinical. A 23-year-old female student seeking another woman to share a house. One picture accompanied the listing, the outside of a modest, if slightly run-down home, shadowed by overgrown trees. Still, desperation has a way of muffling warning bells. Amanda fired off an email expressing her interest. Less than an hour later, a reply pinged into her inbox. The occupant apologized for the late timing, but explained she worked odd hours and asked Amanda to come by around 8 p.m. Something about the haste gnawed at Amanda's instincts, but she shook it off. The next evening, she pulled up to the house just as twilight melted into full darkness. The house was worse in person. The lawn was an untamed wilderness, and the windows, cloaked in grime, reflected nothing but murky shapes. A note was taped to the front door, scrawled in hasty penmanship. "Door broken. Use back door." Amanda hesitated. Her heartbeat quickened, each thud loud in the thick summer air. Steeling herself, she circled the house. The backyard was worse, cluttered with rusting furniture, scraps of forgotten projects. She knocked on the back door, her knuckles. It swung open to reveal not a young woman, but an older man. Mid-40s, unshaven, with clothes that hung loose on his wiry frame. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm the landlord," he said. "She asked me to show you around." Amanda's mind screamed at her to run, but politeness anchored her feet. The house was barren inside, the hollow rooms echoing with every step. Only one light, the kitchen light, was on, casting a sickly yellow glow over the peeling linoleum. The man rushed her through the tour, flipping lights on and off hurriedly, never lingering in any room. One door he refused to open. "That's her room," he said gruffly. "She wouldn't like us snooping." Amanda nodded, feigning understanding, but her skin crawled. As they returned to the living room, something caught her eye. A plank of wood nailed across the inside of the front door. The trap. The realization hit her so hard she nearly stumbled. "Oh, before you go," the man said, voice too casual, "you should see the basement. Just refinished it. Great rec room." He positioned himself between her and the back door, gesturing towards the dark staircase. "Ladies first," he smiled. Amanda's mind raced. Her phone buzzed. A text from a friend. Pure salvation. Feigning surprise, she pressed the phone to her ear. "Hey." "Yeah, I'm outside," she lied loudly. "Sorry, gotta run," she chirped, breezing past the man and slipping out the back door. She didn't stop running until she reached her car, the man's figure silhouetted in the doorway behind her. She locked the doors with trembling fingers and peeled out of the driveway, not daring to look back. When she reached the safety of her apartment, her mind reeled. Logic and adrenaline battled for dominance. She called the police. The Craigslist ad had vanished. Later, police investigations uncovered the chilling truth. The house had been abandoned for over 6 months. There was no college student, no legitimate listing. The locked door he refused to show her, his living space, littered with old blankets, fast food wrappers, and worse. The basement he had tried to lead her into was a far more sinister scene. A thin fishing line was strung across the staircase at shin level, a crude trap meant to send someone tumbling into the dark. And at the bottom of the stairs, a broomstick, its handle wrapped tightly with leather belts, alongside a small wooden box, filled with rolls of duct tape. Amanda never found out who the man truly was. The police never caught him. But sometimes when she closes her eyes at night, she swears she can still feel the chill of that basement doorway yawning open before her. Jenny's small bedroom was soaked in the soft blue glow of her digital alarm clock. The rhythmic hum of her ceiling fan blended with the occasional creak of the old house settling into the night. Beside her, her phone rested on the nightstand, screen dark, but working silently in the background, running the Sleep as Android app. She had installed it months ago, curious about tracking her sleep cycles, finding the optimal wake-up moments. Sometimes she'd sift through the recorded snippets, a cough here, the rustle of sheets there, harmless echoes of solitude. But not tonight. Scrolling through the app the next morning, bleary-eyed and sipping coffee, Jenny almost deleted the new recordings without listening. Routine. Boring. Almost. At 2:04 IEM, a file stood out. A spike in sound levels caught her attention. She tapped play. Static filled her earbuds, the soft friction of sheets, a muffled sigh, then clear as day, her own voice emerged, slurred with sleep. "What are you doing?" A beat of silence. Then, a voice responded. A male voice. "No." Jenny's mug slipped from her hands, clattering into the sink. Her heart thudded against her ribs, pulse hammering in her ears. She replayed it, over and over. The male voice was low, almost a whisper, but undeniable, calm, familiar in the worst possible way. Jenny lived alone, and the only other occupant of the house that night was her 3-year-old son, sleeping soundly down the hall. She forced herself to listen further. There was more. Faint clicking sounds followed, like fingernails tapping lightly against wood or metal. Another muttered phrase, too distorted to understand. It wasn't a dream. Jenny's sleep-talking voice had been clear, casual, almost conversational. But the male voice held a different texture, a presence, rooted disturbingly in reality. Desperate for answers, Jenny posted the audio clip to Reddit, begging for opinions, hoping someone could rationalize it away. Instead, she found validation and horror. Audio experts, casual listeners, even skeptics agreed. The second voice was real. One user went so far as to analyze the pitch, tone, and cadence of the voices. He concluded definitively that Jenny could not have produced both voices herself. Panic set in. Jenny scoured her home, checking every lock, every window, every inch of shadow. No. But that night, as she tucked her son into bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that the house was no longer hers alone. She moved within a week, abandoning the house to its empty corridors and unanswered questions. To this day, she has no idea who whispered back to her that night, or how close they had been, standing unseen in the darkness. The stars hung heavy above Provo Canyon, their cold light barely penetrating the black maw of the trees. The couple stood at the trailhead, young and exhilarated, their breath visible in the crisp night air. It was the end of a perfect first date, and neither wanted it to end just yet. "Let's go for a walk," he suggested, nodding toward the shadowy mouth of the trail. She hesitated, glancing into the woods, where the moonlight quickly surrendered to darkness. But his easy smile reassured her, and soon they were side by side, crunching over gravel and fallen leaves. The path wound deeper into the canyon, the walls of pine pressing in tighter, the world narrowing to a single thread of dirt underfoot. They laughed softly, whispered in the hush of the forest, their voices absurdly loud against the endless quiet. But as they pushed deeper, something shifted. The canopy thickened, blotting out the stars, and a cold unease began to uncoil in their guts. The man took a step forward, and his foot struck something soft. He froze. She nearly bumped into him, reaching instinctively for his arm. The world seemed to hold its breath. A few more seconds passed before he pulled out his phone, flicking on the flashlight. But the beam only illuminated the trail directly at their feet, a patch of dirt, a scatter of leaves. Nothing else. Still, the sensation lingered, that unmistakable feeling of brushing against something unnatural, something wrong. Without speaking, they both turned back, quickening their pace toward the safety of the car. The trees seemed to lean closer with every hurried step. When they finally reached the parking lot, relief hit them so hard it was dizzying. They laughed it off, chalked it up to overactive imaginations, the tricks of darkness and nerves. The moment slipped into the vault of half-forgotten memories, a strange footnote to an otherwise magical night. Years passed. They married, built a life together. One evening, curled on the couch with a TV flickering before them, they stumbled across a true crime documentary. The name Ted Bundy appeared on the screen. The hairs on the husband's arms prickled as Bundy's cold, matter-of-fact voice filled the room. In the interview, Bundy recounted a night in Utah in Provo Canyon. The night he almost got caught? He had lured a woman into the woods, ended her life, and moments later had hidden in the trees as a young couple wandered up the trail. Bundy described watching them from the shadows, holding his breath as the man stepped directly over the body he had just left behind. The husband dropped the remote, staring blankly at the screen. A chill spread through him, anchoring him to the couch. "That was us," he whispered. His wife said nothing, her hand tightening around his. In the end, they realized just how close they had come to a nightmare. Bundy had been only a few feet away that night, concealed by darkness and fate. And they had walked oblivious through the aftermath of horror itself.